Hey guys, Blue Earth Thing here, and today we're going to take down another conspiracy, but this time something a little different.
Some people say it's hard to believe that the moon landings were faked. I say it's hard to believe that they were real.
This is Bart Sibrel. He's a conspiracy theorist most famous for getting falcon punched by Buzz Aldrin himself. He is also the creator of the documentary A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, along with a few others. Yet, with his vast experience with video production, he still cannot find a microphone or stable cameraman to save his life. Anyway, to answer your point, Bart, we can find it hard to believe that NASA faked the moon landings, due to the fact that so many people worked on them, the lack of the technology needed to fake it, and because, well, we have found the moon landing sites on the moon.
What NASA is claiming is that they went 1,000 times farther than they can go today with 50-year-older technology on the very first attempt with 1/millionth the computing power in all of NASA than is in a cell phone.
No, we did not go to the moon on 50-year-old technology. We went with the most advanced technology that we had at the time, with the best engineers in the world working on the rockets. Just because your little brain cannot comprehend how we can make it to the moon doesn't mean it can't be done. Also, Apollo 11 is called that for a reason, because it wasn't our first try. In fact, Apollo wasn't even our first manned mission. It started with Mercury, then Gemini, and then it came to Apollo. With Apollo alone, there were many tests that had to be done. Everything was tested, everything was rehearsed. Apollo 10 was a full dress rehearsal, where they got the lander within a few thousand feet of the moon's surface. And I know you know this, because you made a documentary on the subject.
All the proof that you need that the moon landings are fake is in this one picture. In sunlight, shadows will always run parallel with one another. This is because the sun is about 1,000,000 times bigger than the Earth, and it casts shadows in the same direction over an entire continent. So you'll see in sunlight, shadows always run parallel and never intersect. Here's a picture which the federal government claims was taken on the moon. The astronaut shadow runs at 12 o'clock, and this rock, only about 5 feet away, the shadow runs at 9 o'clock. This is a 90-degree difference from objects 5 feet apart from one another. This proves that this was taken on Earth with an electrical light inside of a television studio. This is all the proof that you need that the moon landings were fake.
First thing wrong with this is the fact that he is being deceptive. The lines do not follow the shadows. Here are some lines that I made that better follow the shadows, and you can see that the angle has decreased by a lot. Also, the reason the shadows do this is because the rock is in a crater. This can be seen here, where the lip of the crater is casting a shadow on the rest of it. This rock is obviously resting on the side of the crater, and the ground is uneven. And one last thing, the way we know that the shadows are not made by multiple lights is the fact that there are not multiple shadows. When multiple lights are used, multiple shadows develop on the ground. This is why movies rarely show the ground when lighting their subjects with multiple lights. This effect is not shown here in any way, so it has to be lit by a single light source.
If Toyota said that they made a car 50 years ago that could go 50,000 miles on a gallon of gasoline, and yet today their best car could only go 50 miles per gallon, or 1,000th the distance, wouldn't the fraud of the previous claim be obvious? And yet, this is exactly the moon landing fraud.
You act like we haven't been sending rovers to Mars for the last 30 years, bud. NASA is now focused on many other things, like the ISS, Mars, and telescopes in space, all of which were not around in the 1970s.
And yet people don't see it because of their emotional attachment to it.
You cannot see the flaws in your own arguments because of your emotional attachment to it.
They're claiming they went 1,000 times farther 50 years ago than they can go today with 50-year-older technology. That doesn't make any sense. It's the only time in history that a technological achievement like the automobile or the airplane or nuclear power, that no nation on Earth could repeat it 50 years later. when in fact it should be 100 times greater 50 years later.
Okay, this is starting to piss me off. Our technology is more than 100 times greater now than it was then. We're landing rockets upright. We're putting a massive 21-foot or 6.5-meter telescope into space soon. We just flew by Pluto. We have landed 10 landers on Mars. We built a massive football-sized space station above Earth. And all of these are great achievements done alongside each other, and all of which were virtually impossible to do with the technology in the 70s.
If they could go to the moon with 1960s technology, men would be in another solar system by now. Men would have walked on Mars 10 years later, 40 years ago, which never happened. And there would be bases on the moon there today, of which there are none. It's the only time in the history of the world that technology that cost $175 billion was deliberately destroyed afterwards.
Okay, this man has no idea what he's talking about, and I'm convinced of it now. We did not destroy the technology afterwards. We simply advanced so far that we no longer had to use it or the computers that were used to run it. If you want to go see the technology used in the moon landings, I suggest you travel to either Space Center Houston, the Kennedy Space Center, or my favorite, the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Here, you can see the remaining Saturn V rockets in their full glory and much of the technology that was used to run it.
Would Bill Gates spend $175 billion to make the first computer, and then when he was done, throw it and the schematics in the trash? But that's what NASA claims that they did.
When? Where? I want you to provide us the evidence for that claim. I know where he's going with this. He's going to say, but my telemetry recordings. Sorry, man. That was the backup slow scan TV recordings that were recorded onto telemetry tapes. If you want to see the original content of the tapes, just look up Apollo 11 landing footage on YouTube, because that's all that it was. NASA did not lose the contents of those tapes. They just have many other tapes with the same thing on it.
They only did that to destroy the evidence of the fraud, which is proof itself that they didn't go, because if they really went, they would never destroy the technology. The B-52 bomber was made 70 years ago and is still in service today in the United States Air Force because it worked so well.
This is so deceptive. This is like saying that the Chevy Corvette has been around for 70 years without change. The B-52 bomber has been changed and updated many times. There have been 8 generations of the B-52, and many more if you consider the heavy modifications that the current ones have to stay updated.
Now they want to return to the moon, and they're having to recreate all that equipment from scratch.
He acts like the last 30 years in spaceflight just hasn't taken place.
Because they deliberately destroyed it in order to hide the evidence of the fraud. I say it's harder to believe that the moon landings are real than to believe that they were fake. And this one picture proves that it was taken inside of a television studio on Earth.
I say to you, sir, either you have no idea what you're talking about, or you're just a lying charlatan out parading your false theories in order to be famous. Your choice. Hey guys, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe and leave a comment if you want. Hit me up on Twitter at Blue Earth Thing, same thing with Instagram. And again, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Blue Earth Thing out.